The wind danced gently through the ancient pines, their needles humming a soft lullaby only the night could hear. As Ilara stepped barefoot onto the moss-covered trail that led deeper into the sleeping forest, her lantern flickering with a golden glow that cast long, slow-moving shadows across the ferns and fallen logs, while distant owls cooed in slow rhythm, and the sound of a nearby brook added its own delicate murmur, trickling over smooth stones as though whispering secrets passed down for centuries. Ilara's breath moved in harmony with the night, slow and steady, a calming ebb and flow that synchronized with the rustle of leaves above and the crunch of softened twigs beneath her feet, the warm fabric of her shawl trailing behind, brushing against ferns that curled back as if they too felt the comfort of her presence. Her fingertips grazed the bark of the ancient trees, their surfaces rough and grounding, each step drawing her deeper into the story whispered by the earth beneath her toes, where forgotten spirits watched in peace from behind moonlit branches, and glowing mushrooms pulsed gently in their blue bioluminescent calm. Her thoughts softened as she followed the curve of the trail that twisted gently past a hollow tree, where a gentle breeze blew upward like a breath from the earth itself, carrying the aroma of damp wood and wild lavender that grew in hidden patches between mossy stones. The silence was not empty, but full of warmth, of whispers, of memory, the way one might remember a melody from childhood or a mother's touch on a fevered brow. And as she wandered farther, the gentle patter of tiny paws joined her, forest creatures unseen but present, a raccoon perhaps, or a fox padding silently alongside, as her invisible companion. The stars above pierced the thick canopy only in patches, revealing celestial fragments of a grander tale written in stardust and stillness. And every now and then Ilara would pause, her breath forming tiny clouds in the cool midnight air, listening, just listening, to the world holding her, to the trees humming in harmony, to the brook repeating its lullaby, to the heartbeat of the forest itself, which pulsed slow, steady, and comforting. And she would smile, eyes half closed, sinking deeper into the sounds that carried her like a river of whispering winds and lullaby echoes into the heart of a clearing where a willow tree stood alone, its long arms swaying as if it had been waiting only for her, its trunk warm to the touch, smoother than stone, and beneath it a stone bench covered in ivy, where Ilara finally sat, placing her lantern on the ground, where its glow gently spilled upward into the willow's branches. She closed her eyes and breathed in once more, letting go of all time and urgency, allowing the sounds of the forest to rise and fall around her like a tide of peace, her heart sinking with the breeze and the stars, her mind a soft, floating cloud drifting among ancient echoes. And as she remained there, eyes closed, lips parted in a whisper of a sigh, the night wrapped around her like a lullaby shawl, and the forest, in all its soft, soundless glory, sang her into dreams more vivid than waking life, dreams where rivers spoke, where stars blinked slowly, where every sound, every rustle, whisper, crackle, was not just noise, but meaning, like the turning pages of a story that the earth tells only to those quiet enough to listen. And Ilara, who had wandered here seeking silence, found instead a world louder than thought, but softer than any voice, a sanctuary made of echo and hush, of scent and shadow, of warmth and wind. And it held her, not just her body, but her memories, her breath, her thoughts, and slowly, gently, it told her that she belonged, that she always had, and as the minutes passed like clouds gliding across the face of a silver moon, Elara drifted deeper into the story of the forest, where time folded in on itself like silk, where sleep and wakefulness met and shook hands, where the entire world existed in that single, everlasting, sound-wrapped moment. And as she rested beneath the ancient willow, its branches swaying in rhythms older than time, Elara felt a subtle shift in the air, not abrupt, not loud, but gentle, like the change in a dream you only notice when you're already within it. Her fingers brushed the damp ivy on a stone bench, the tiny leaves cool and slick, breathing the earth's night moisture through their veins, and somewhere high above, an unseen owl hooted once, deep and echoing, a guardian of the dark announcing that the moment had deepened into something sacred, something timeless, something meant only for those who dared to listen with more than ears. And Elara did. She listened with her breath, her skin, her very heartbeat, each thump like a low drum in the silence, her pulse echoing through her fingertips and into the mossy stone, becoming part of the forest's rhythm. And the breeze, oh, the breeze began to speak more deliberately now, weaving through the low-hanging branches and past her shoulders, curling into her ears with whispers of languages older than words, stories not told but felt, messages woven into temperature and texture and tone, and without standing, without even opening her eyes, Elara leaned her weight slightly back into the willow's smooth bark, and the tree received her, holding her spine as though it had known her weight for centuries, like it had waited for her, this one wanderer, to finally come and rest in the curve of its roots and be still. And as her breathing grew softer, her inner world slowly unfurled, blooming inward like a nocturnal flower drawn open by moonlight. And in that unfolding came memories, not hers alone, but those seated in the forest itself. Visions of distant storms that fed the land, of deer born in the safety of thickets, of the first time fireflies blinked over these ferns, and how the wind carried their glow from leaf to leaf in a constellation of living lanterns. And Elara felt them, not as thoughts, but as sensations, warm and humming behind her eyes, her lashes fluttering slightly, as if her body were unsure whether it dreamt or woke. And in this twilight within twilight, a new sound began to bloom, a delicate chiming, like glass bells touched by wind fingers, not from above or around, but below, from the soil itself, a music that rose not in waves, but spirals, climbing slowly like smoke. And Elara leaned forward just slightly, cupping her hands before her knees, and the ground responded, the moss pulsing under her palms with a rhythm like a heartbeat, not hers, not the trees, but something older, something larger. And when she looked downward, the lantern's glow caught the shape of a spiral drawn into the moss, small, faint, yet precise, a marking that shimmered subtly under her gaze, as though made not with ink, but with light itself trapped in the weave of time. And as she touched it with her fingertip, it pulsed once, not bright, not sharp, but soft and warm, like someone exhaling into her soul. And then her surroundings began to shift, not in color or form, but in depth, the forest folding around her like pages, turning in a book made of dreams. And each rustling leaf became a syllable, each drop of dew a vowel, every creak of bark a phrase in a sentence she could not translate but wholly understood. And the whispering deepened, no longer only outside her, but inside, as though the forest were speaking from within her chest, through the channels of her breath and the currents of her veins. And With this new-found harmony, she stood, slowly, reverently, her feet light, her shoulders relaxed, her lantern swinging from one hand, while the other brushed aside a gentle curtain of mist that had gathered as though summoned by story, and she walked, not forward, not back, but inward, into a path that had not been there before, a corridor of silver fog lined with ferns that shimmered like velvet, and above her the sky opened just enough to let a shaft of moonlight fall in a narrow column, marking her path like a thread of divine silk dropped from the heavens, and along this thread she walked, her toes sinking into the moss with each step, the silence growing richer with every breath. And as she moved, so too did the whispers grow, no longer disembodied, but accompanied by soft footfalls beside her, a presence not of fear, but of knowing, of welcome, of kinship, and though she dared not look, she sensed it. A being, tall and graceful, perhaps made of bark and breeze, walking in step with her, each movement like the page-turning of the world, and when they reached a clearing lit only by star reflections shimmering on an unseen pool, she turned at last and saw only her own shadow, elongated, luminous, shimmering with starlight and wind, and she realized that the presence was not other, but self, not separate, but a part of her awakened by the forest's embrace. And as this realization settled into her bones, the stars themselves began to descend, not falling, but floating, gently, slowly, like dandelion seeds carried on invisible currents, settling around her, above her, on her shoulders, and in her hair, and each one hummed a note, a syllable, a gentle sound that struck not the ear but the heart, and soon she stood in a constellation all her own, surrounded by the gentle soundscape of the universe itself, rendered in whispers and breath and breeze and warmth. And as her eyes closed once more, not from exhaustion, but from a fullness too vast to gaze upon, the ground beneath her softened further, moss parting like velvet curtains to reveal a cradle of soft earth, warm and welcoming.